Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to another Wednesday with the HPR Chronicles with Shakur and Smith.
What's up?
I'm Shakur.
I'm Smith.
There you go. It's a podcast about history, politics, and race from a cool perspective, not corny and boring.
Exactly.
Like some of the boring school teachers you had in history class back in the day, and even some of the kids today.
Yeah.
We always try to just kind of break it down simple for you guys sometimes so that you can kind of get it and understand it, and you can let your kids listen and stuff too to the podcast if they're in history class and stuff like that. If you find any of the subjects interesting, you know. Chris here, aka Crispy, is a veteran of the Army Reserve that works for the VA with a passion for history and politics, and I'm a filmmaker, film director from Trinidad and Tobago. You know, I've traveled a lot, and I've always had a love for history and politics as well. So together we came up with a cool podcast to bring you guys some interesting facts and stuff like that. It's about truth. It's not pro any race, just pro truth. And if the truth offends you, we're sorry, not sorry. That's what we always say. And today, for October 23rd, I'm going to talk about the Reconstruction era.
Okay.
Because it was an interesting part of history right after the Civil War. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think next week, if you guys tune in, Crispy's going to be talking about CBD. And, you know, and I have a CBD company as well called CBD Organic Oasis. That information is in the description if you guys want some good CBD that actually works. Yep. Dr. Oz talked about fake CBD on the Breakfast Club and on his show a couple of times. And we actually have real CBD. In fact, our marketing girl for my CBD company, she recently got injured and she was taking a lot of pills, and she started taking some of our CBD. And she was able to get off of the pills.
Nice. You
know, and I was happy to hear that. I mean, I always knew the company, our manufacturer, was organic and clean, but it was just good to get the affirmation. So anyway, Crispy will be talking about CBD next Wednesday for you guys. That's our Halloween episode. So, you know, take that CBD before you head out in your costume. You feel good. You don't have as much anxiety when you see the other ghouls and goblins. But today we're gonna get into the Reconstruction era, and let's get into it. This is kind of interesting, and like I always say, Crispy, one of the things I like about our podcast is that I myself get to learn a lot of interesting facts that I'd heard about but never really got a chance to dive into.
Yeah.
So today I was I actually started studying it last week and just kind of got into other work stuff, and then so I was really able to dig into it today and read a bunch of articles and stuff like that. And man, here it is. So the Reconstruction era was the period in American history which lasted from 1863 to 1877. It was a significant chapter in the history of American civil rights. That's the first thing that I'm going to say. So after the Civil War, Crispy, the United States had to integrate a slave population and a population that was against integrating the slaves back into the country.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So they had to figure it out. They were like, man, we just freed these slaves, but then you have all these people in the South that don't want these slaves freed. So what are we going to do? So as we all know, about a week after the Civil War ended, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and Andrew Johnson took over, who was the vice president at the time, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Yeah, Lincoln wanted to unite everybody and play fair. Andrew Johnson, who was a racist, was pissed that the South had lost and didn't think that the former slave should have any rights or role in the South. You know, and you know what, Crispy, it's kind of interesting how all this stuff played out. Yeah. You know what I mean? And the way I formulated the podcast today, you know, I really get into the intricacies of what happened and how Reconstruction emerged and how it disappeared and why, which is really cool. So from 1865 to 1867, Johnson had states established new all-white governments. When this happened, the governments looked just like the old Confederate government they replaced. So it went back to what it kind of looked like before they won the war. You know what I'm saying?
If Lincoln would have not died,
exactly, that wouldn't have happened.
Things could have most likely would have been way different. Right now.
It would have been way different.
For all
because
we know,
Johnson,
we could have been equally done. You know, things could have. Point. Wow, interesting. And actually, now that you say that, it's kind of like when you talk about democracy and the presidency and how much they affect the country. Yeah, you can kind of hearing about that so far. And how one president just reverted things back. Yeah. And then if you take what's going on nowadays, right now, how one president is kind of changing.
But it gets deeper. Those are great points. But it gets deeper, and it actually, and what's funny about you saying all that is, even though Lincoln was actually assassinated, stuff was kind of still going in the right way. Yeah. You know what I mean? And you'll hear why until it all went till it all went downhill. Okay. So
till it all went south.
Till it all went south. Literally. No pun intended. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So like I said, when Johnson, got into power after Abe was killed, he established all new white governments that looked like the old Confederate government they replaced. Mm-hmm. So instead of giving everyone equal rights and opportunities to hold office, it looked like the same. Nothing had changed. You know what I'm saying? So a few things did happen, which I didn't know, which I learned studying this. Things like Howard University, which still exists today, a lot of the middle schools, elementary, high schools, and stuff like that, and that was all thanks to the Freedmen's Bureau. And you guys could look that up, and that lasted until 1870. But the Freedmen's Bureau had the power to also divide and confiscate abandoned land to former slaves, which was important because land ownership is important, and it was promised by the generals of the Union Army. 40 acres and a mule plots, and to the former slaves, land ownership equaled freedom. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? That's how it was back then.
But also equals to being able to support yourself.
Absolutely.
And, so it's just
some form of wealth. It is. Yeah. But as we all know, to this day, the 40 acres and a mule never happened. You know what I mean? What did happen? Go ahead.
Remember, it happened, but they took the land back.
They took the land back, right? So essentially, it never happened. You know, it happened, but did happen. You know what I'm saying? What did happen was Johnson ordered all land to be given back to the former slave owners. So the land ended up with the same owners, which led to sharecropping, which we covered on another show. Yeah. And I didn't even know. I can't remember. We on what, episode 30 or something? We're shooting today, so I can't remember.
Yeah, 30.
If when we talked about sharecropping, we talked about what happened right before. But this is exactly what led right into it. Okay. You know what I'm saying? I can't remember, but you guys can listen to both podcasts and kind of, see how they relate to make it all make sense. So which, them giving the land back to the slave owners instead of dividing it up, equally amongst the slaves and the owners and everybody, which was supposed to happen, it didn't happen, and that's how sharecropping started. And we, like I just said, we covered sharecropping in another episode, so I won't get into that, but do your research on sharecropping, and you'll see what it's all about. I do want to add, though, that by the late 1860s, which I didn't know, I found out today, poor white farmers were also sharecroppers. And by the Great Depression, most sharecroppers were white. You know what I mean? Okay. Which I didn't know, which was interesting to find out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because sharecropping tied the workers to the land, it still looked like slavery. And the Republicans at the time wasn't happy. Because their whole thing was, we want stuff to, we want some equality. Okay. And stuff
this
like
is
that.
This is the Republicans that were more like Democrats.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Before. Sure. Yeah. Exactly.
So this is still the Abraham Lincoln party of Republicans.
Right. So after 1867, they took over Reconstructions. Some Republicans thought the war was fought for equal rights, and some, like Tommy Lee Jones, Stevens, wanted to take land back from planters and give it to the former slaves.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So there was some like that too. But the Republicans weren't saying that. They were just saying, hey, let's divide it up equally. We're trying to make this a level playing field now, believe it or not. Wow. You know, this is when the Republicans passed the Civil Rights Bill, which said people born in the U.S. was a citizen regardless of race and deserved to be equal. You know what I'm saying?
Wait, when?
Yeah, this was in 18. Right, yeah, it was right after 1867.
And what was it
right
called
after
again?
the Civil Rights Bill.
Wow. Okay.
The Republicans. So Johnson, who was president, vetoed the law, saying protecting the rights of African Americans discriminated against white people. So he actually vetoed it.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Got it.
The Republicans in Congress were pissed and overturned his veto. It was one of the first times in history. And you know, with a vote, and the Civil Rights Act became the law of the land. You know what I'm saying? So it still ended up becoming the law of the land, you know. Yeah. Soon after they had to amend the Constitution, which had no Democratic support. So when you hear that in history, Republicans had our back, and blacks were Republicans in the day. Back in the day, this is why. Because originally, the Democrats were against everything that stood for equal rights for blacks. Yeah. How and when this change happened, we will cover in another show, and I actually wanna cover that in a show when it went from, you know, complete support of Republicans to no support for Democrats, and how the turn actually twisted. Okay. You know, how that tide actually turned. I actually want to cover that in a separate show. So because of how Johnson tried to have all white governments, there were hardly any Democrats in Congress. So this is how we got the 14th Amendment, which had a lot of laws against black people. Johnson tried to have laws like we weren't allowed to leave the property without written permission from our employers, and every Negro had to be in regular service of someone white or a former slave owner that is responsible for their conduct.
You had to be.
This is what they tried to do.
Okay.
Another one was we couldn't preach or congregate without special permission from the police. That was another law. And these were all like the black list or the black laws they had or whatever. Okay. So then they vetoed Johnson again and passed the Reconstruction Act. So when Johnson tried to do that, the Republicans vetoed his ass again. Damn. Because even though he was president, the Republicans ruled the House. Okay. So everything he tried to do, which was against us, they would overpower him and veto him. Wow. You know what I'm saying? Yep. So what happens? So what happens after the Reconstruction Act? This divided the South into 5 districts and made it law to have the participation of black men, and they had to get rid of the 14th Amendment if they wanted to be a part of the Union. So basically, the Republicans said, if you guys want to be a part of the Union, you 5 South states, and they had it on the map. I'll put it up for our YouTube viewers. They said, you guys got to get rid of the 14th Amendment. We're bringing in the 15th Amendment, and that's the only way you guys are going to be a part of this union. You know what I'm saying? So in 1868, Johnson was voted out, and Grant became president, who was a Republican and a Union general. And you know, they had won. You know what I'm saying? Yep. But Grant barely won. So they figured we would win more if blacks could also vote. Okay. So then came the 15th Amendment, which stopped states from denying votes based on race, but not gender. They still had the gender inequality. Okay. But black men was actually they were able to vote. Okay. Which the Republicans knew would help them, because everything they were doing was for the equality of our people anyway, right after the Civil War when slavery ended. So they knew they allowed black men to vote, it would keep them in office. Yeah. So it was something in it for them as well. But they did want to continue Abraham Lincoln's vision of, hey, let's try to be equal and make this a level playing field for all. Okay. You know what I mean? So
here's a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So if they were able to overturn that, why couldn't they have stopped? Which probably wasn't a law or something. Stop Andrew Jackson from taking back the land. And I mean, I just was just thinking in my head. So.
Yeah, I mean, do we talk about? I think we talk about it a little more, but I don't know. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean.
I know we talked about things, but
we talked. Yeah, I know. Well, why didn't they veto that too?
Would there have been a way to stop?
Yeah, would there have been a way to stop that? Yeah. So after this happened, former slaves started to exercise their rights by doing things like sit-ins, to integrate streetcars, voting in elections, and holding office. Most blacks were Republicans, and because they could vote, Republicans dominated in the South. You know what I'm saying? So here you had, a Republican Congress, and now you have a Republican president, and you have the South who hated all this stuff, but they were losing everything. They were losing all the votes because everybody was supporting what the North was doing. You know what I mean? There were this is interesting, there were about 2,000 African Americans that held office during Reconstruction. Wow. Like 2,000. You know what I'm saying? For example, Pinckney B.S. Pinchback was the first black governor of Louisiana from 1872 to 1873.
What?
And went on to be a senator and a member of the House. This was important for many reasons, because it meant we had representation in office that ensure our rights were being held up. And we had more than 2,000. I mean, they just named one, but I went to another site that had a list of a lot of them. You know what I mean? So you guys, all the listeners and people that watch on YouTube, you guys could just, go back and Google the African American leaders from the Reconstruction era, and you'll see who those 2,000 were and what state they represented.
We'd be going another hour.
It would take me a while to throw that back. But this was one of the ones they mentioned. He had an interesting name, so I took this one. Pinckney B.S. Pinchback.
B.S.
That's a funny name, man. Yeah, but one thing I want to say before we go on is that this was an interesting time and a very important time in history, because right after slavery, some whites, some Republicans decided, like, hey, things should be equal. We had over 2,000 black represented in this country right after slavery.
Wow.
But you wouldn't think that today.
Yeah, you sure wouldn't.
And and it was that important back then for a lot of reasons. I mean, now I'm about to get into how it all changed.
Okay.
But it was really interesting to hear that that's how it was. And I was asking myself, what would have happened if we would have been able to continue that from then to now? Think about how different this America would actually be if everything I'm about to go over right now didn't happen, and it just would have stayed like that. Dude, the playing field would have been so equal.
Yeah.
If you think about it, segregation probably wouldn't have happened.
Yep.
Rosa Parks would have never happened.
No. Redlining
would have never happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy, man.
But now it would have been interesting to know if over time would Martin Luther King still come up and still would want to have, because at this point they probably still segregated some stuff, right?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know. I mean, I honestly didn't go that deep into it.
And stuff like that yet. So I'm just wondering, was everything integrated or not? And even if not, that's cool. But at some point, someone might have said, "Hey, we need to integrate schools." Things would have.
You want to know, Crispy? That's an interesting point. I'm glad you brought that up, because it has been said that integration harmed us more than it did us good.
That too, yeah.
So, for all you know, if this political system had been consistent throughout the last 300, 400 years, maybe we would just have our own everything.
Yeah.
Which is also fine. You know what I'm trying to say? I mean,
it's still actually needed to happen. Because that's still black owners or, black people creating their own wealth, like we talked about. And so it would have been, it's just again, like I say, would have been truly segregated if it was already like that or not. I don't know.
Yeah, we would have
I'm sure things would have been.
Because I can do another show, and I will, about the stuff we, like the wealth and stuff we did garner, like Black Wall Street and stuff, that was burnt down. Correct. So we were doing our own thing. But again, I'm sure if the consistency of those 2,000 would have been held in office throughout time, I'm sure a lot of that stuff would not have happened. Yeah. Even the burning down of Black Wall Street, even when they took the bank in Washington, the Douglas Bank, and I mean just everything that actually happened. Yeah. The big plot of land that they stole, 1,000 acres or whatever it was down south.
And then in New York when they took what is Grant Park, I think.
There's a lot of things that probably would not have happened. Yeah. If we had that representation we had initially after the Civil Rights War. You know what I'm saying? You know, the Civil War, I mean. So let me like get into to how it all broke down. Okay. So the whites figured the best way to turn things back to how it was. So as we just said to our listeners, everything was because of Reconstruction, which the Republicans were responsible for. We had people in office, over 2,000. Stuff was going on a level playing field. Stuff was becoming fair after slavery. So this is what happened. Okay. The whites figured the best way to turn things back to how it was before Reconstruction was through violence. That's when the KKK emerged, which was a terrorist organization that went after Republicans, both black and white, which I didn't know. It wasn't just blacks. It was a political organization first that beat up and murdered people to scare them out of voting. Holy. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So the massacre of Colfax, Louisiana, is one of the one noted in history. And it was one of the worst in history, where hundreds of former slaves were murdered. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And this was all in an effort to scare us from voting, and the whites that were supporting them and all that stuff from voting. So with this and other discriminations, fewer blacks voted, which allowed the Democrats to take control in the South and returned white delegations to Washington. See, now the change is starting to happen, but it was through violence. The Democrats called themselves redeemers back then because they said they redeemed the South from black rule. You know what I mean? Eventually, in 1876, we had a depression, and Republicans stopped fighting for the rights of blacks in the South, which was hard and expensive. The next election, a Republican with the last name of Hayes won, but they agreed to give control of the South to the Democrats. The deal was to leave the South alone and let them handle their own affairs, and also build a railroad through Texas, which was called the Bargain of 1877. Okay. And this is what killed Reconstruction. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Them cutting these deals, and you know what I mean? Like, giving the Democrats control in the South and putting everything back to the way it was before. Interesting. Yep. You know what I mean? It trips me out. So with just to like sum this up, so with no federal troops in the South, and the control in the hands of white Democrats, the Southern states went back to restricting the freedoms of black people. They passed Jim Crow. This is when Jim Crow came after.
Which we did talk about.
Yeah, which we did cover.
Review that.
Yeah, in the South, which we covered. And they took away black people's rights to vote. So we had rights to vote after slavery, the black men. But after the Democrats retook control, they took the rights back, and we weren't able to vote anymore. So it's interesting that, and I've heard this. As a matter of fact, I just saw Kanye West doing his Sunday service up in Seattle, and he was talking about how he gets bashed for liking Trump, but we don't know that blacks used to be Democrats, and Republicans, and Republicans supported us first. Kanye West was just spewing this. I just saw it on the news last week. Yeah,
but of course
week.
his history is he's got the right history.
But he was saying used
actually to. Right. But I don't like that argument when people go, the Republican Party is the party that did this and all that. Right. And it's like, yeah, but that they switched. Yeah, they switched. So that's what I want to talk about on the show. Okay. That's what I want to cover. When that switch happened. Yeah.
Because, you know, right now I'm ending this podcast with the Democrats retook control of the South and took all of our rights away. Stopped everything, ended Reconstruction, everything. So what I want to know is how all of a sudden they were for us and we for them, and the Republicans started to go against us when at first they were all for us. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I do.
That's what I want to know to our listeners. That's what I want to cover.
We'll have to do with the history of the Republican.
Yeah, the Republican Party.
And even the Democrats,
too.
the
history of the Democratic and Republican Party.
And I started doing something.
What I want to know is when it intersected and switched over.
Yeah.
That's what I would like to know.
I thought
you know what I'm saying?
I'm just trying to think that I thought I did touch on that in the thing about civil rights.
Yeah.
One of them shows, and you know, but I didn't go to, you know, all the way. I don't recall if I mentioned that part. And I don't think I did. Yeah. Otherwise, I might, you know, I would think my memory would be like, oh yeah, it was such and such.
Right. Yes, man. This was an interesting topic for me. Even going over it, I was like, wow. As I'm reading all these different articles from history.com and the, you know, history.org and the Howard University passage, and as I'm reading all this stuff, I'm like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me, because I didn't know that this is how it actually happened.
Yeah,
and it went into detail, like exactly what happened and how, and how the KKK emerged and why, and you know what I mean.
I knew it was.
Like, you got to be kidding me,
because I can't remember which president, but the one that displayed the movie How America. It's the KKK movie where
not the Spike Lee joint, right?
No.
Okay. That was a good one too. The one he won the Academy Award for the script.
Shoot, here. The Birth of a Nation. Yeah. So that was 1915. And it was a silent film.
Yeah, the one that wasn't.
And it was actually shown in the White House or something like that.
I remember that.
And
I remember the history about it.
Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 1915. You're still so. Yeah, stuff happening quick.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I really want to know like the intersect. So, anyway, guys, that's our show today in history. Again, before I go, you know, definitely look this up on your own. It's very interesting. If you want to know the names of those black representatives in office, there, you know, it is out there. You guys can go through and see who represented what state when and became senators and all that good stuff. So today in history, we only have 2 this week. Go ahead.
I just want to real quick say that, like you said, look up the information to verify or just to get more knowledge on certain things you didn't cover, but also you're doomed to repeat the past mistakes if you don't know what happened in the past.
It's true.
Or you're you know, so people definitely need to be able to vote. Oh, I know exactly what I was going to say. Is it's interesting how I've watched programs or read stuff about terrorist groups within the United States, you know, or domestic terrorism, and how the KKK, like you just said, their objective was to prevent black people from voting, and that they went after anyone who was
in support of that.
And yet, you know, no one still labels them as a truly domestic terrorist.
And the
group.
KKK still exists today, right?
Still today.
Yeah, even though they're not as prominent. Yeah, because when that alt-right march happened, didn't some KKK come out?
Yep.
When they hit that girl or whatever?
David Duke was trying, you know, and he was a grand wizard. You know.
That's interesting. But I'm sure in today's time, their objectives probably has changed.
I mean,
you know, it's probably not
they
about
still
voting
are
anymore, but
about violence. But overall, I think their objective is just that black people don't have power,
blacks
or blacks go away, you know, stuff like that.
Crazy, man. And you know what? You want to know what I realized after go over all this stuff? It all derives from the South and them wanting that old way of being, where slavery, they run everything, no one else has rights but them.
Correct.
Yeah. No one else matters. You know,
what I mean? and people don't.
It just trips me out. Yeah.
And how they just took a group and was like, you look like this, we're whatever, more superior. And another part about, our podcast can sometimes be hard to digest for people who don't agree with the views. But overall, we are really giving facts.
Yeah, these are just facts. Whether you like what happened or not, this is what happened in your country. So if you live here, you just know this is what happened.
And if I'm sorry, we're just going to add some more stuff. I remember just hearing Angela Rye. She was talking to Beto O'Rourke, and how he was confronted by a reporter who said, "Did you know your family owned slaves?" And he didn't. So he was kind of like, oh. And I guess he kind of retells that story. And he said that a lot of white people should look into their history and find out, because there's a good chance that you did. So when, someone says, I didn't do anything. No, you didn't, but your ancestors did. And just in general, yes, there was white people who were oppressed and stuff like that. But it's nowhere near what black people went through back then.
Right, it's nothing, man. And it's funny. One of our friends here in wine country, who hangs out with us, he's Italian, and we got into a little thing with him the other day, and he was like, "Well, what did Italians have to do with the whole thing? It wasn't me." And what's funny is, Christopher Columbus was Italian. For those who don't know, he wasn't, from Spain. He wasn't Spanish. He was Italian. And he went to Spain and got support to go and conquer the rest and colonize the rest of the world. So the Italians are the ones that actually started it all. You know what I'm saying? To our friend here in wine country, we love him, but it's just funny that when this subject comes up, it's so uncomfortable. And just to be clear, we don't have anything against him. We're not saying he did anything, but it's very important for you to know and acknowledge and understand the history and where you are, because that's the only way you're gonna understand what went on and be a part of the healing process to what went on.
And my
because everyone's still being affected by what went on.
Correct. And my statement would be not only learning about it, because then you can educate others, and by the understanding you get, you change your views. So
absolutely.
My objective when I talk to anyone about stuff like this is hopefully changing someone's views of the wrong way to what is factual. That's
right.
That's it.
These are just
when
facts.
Arguments come up, and I even mentioned it back with slavery when they want to compare to Irish and all this other stuff. It's like, please don't deflect. Let's understand what happened, why it happened, and how can we fix it. You know what I mean? How can we make things better? And if just ignoring the issues, then like I said, you're doomed. People are doomed to repeat, and you just. If you really don't care, what do you care about? I mean, just caring about yourself and your family is not enough. I mean, you should care about the well-being.
It's almost like it's too much for them to swallow and look at. It's weird. Like the people like our friend, it's almost like they're afraid to just look at what happened. We're not blaming you. We're just saying we're all affected by what happened, including you. Just acknowledge and understand so you could be a part of the healing process, because it's going to be fixed whether you believe it or not.
And if I may
you know what I'm saying?
Plug, I was watching a repeat of Blackish, and
it's a good show.
Yeah, and it was interesting. The one that they were talking about has to do with women's rights, but it was interesting because the character Bo Tracy Ross is joined a group of women to help promote women's rights, feminism, or the feminist program, or movement, and to promote feminism. And within it, they started talking about, one woman wrote a poster and I don't want to just make 77% of wealth, or the comparing of every dollar a man makes, a white woman makes 77 cents.
Yeah,
but it's lower for blacks and Latin, Spanish, or Hispanic, Hispanics, women. But it was so my interest in it is how when the black women started to say, "Hey, why can't you make this a little bit more diverse?" Because that 77 cents only represents you and your group, doesn't affect. So it was interesting how she then realized, even though that group is doing good, there's unfortunately people tend to just look out for themselves. Yeah. And it's like, oh, well, we'll help you later once we get our stuff done. And then when they get up there, they're like, You know?
Yeah.
So, and I'm sorry for people who are listening. What I'm saying is that, people just brush you off and don't come back to, take care of what needs to be done. And then my ending point is Dre, who's played by Anthony Anderson, right? And he was being schooled on being a sexist to women, where he thought, he was doing things correctly, and the kids on the show was like, nope, you don't necessarily have to hold the door open for women, that they're capable of, it's just interesting the age ranges, because in that show he's like 40s, I guess. Yeah. And then the kids are younger. It's just very, very
that's a really good show. And it's funny. I remember when that real quick. I remember when that show came out, people were upset at the title. It was a big thing about it on the news. And I'm in the entertainment industry, and it was a big deal in entertainment about this title. And at first, I gotta admit, I was a little offended by the title as well. And then afterwards, I was like, it's not that bad. No. Because everybody thought Blackish just wasn't a good.
Oh, the title of the show. Yeah, at first I was like, what is this? At first,
we didn't like it at all in the industry.
Then,
a lot of people
I guess it was the first show, and I was like, oh, I'm down with Blackish.
Yeah, then I heard Anthony explain it on interviews and stuff like that, and I said, okay, it's all good.
Because it's because, isn't it because they're trying to say there's more than one version of being black? So it's like, anyway. Yeah. All right, guys. So today in history for October 23rd, we normally give you guys 4, but this time I only did 2, and I kind of related them to the subject of Reconstruction. So the first one is in 1864, October 23rd, during the U.S. Civil War, Union forces led by General Samuel R. Curtis defeated the Confederate forces in Missouri that were under General Sterling Price. That's one. Then in 1915, on October 23rd, approximately 25,000 women demanded the right to vote with a march in New York City, New York. I just thought that was interesting. Of course, a lot more stuff happened on this day in history, but I kind of wanted to keep the 2 kind of related to the actual show. So we just have 2 historical facts for you guys this week. Once again, thanks for tuning in. Yep. Thanks for listening to us where you listen, whether it's iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, YouTube, all that good stuff. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button so you can keep getting all the historical cool facts that we bring you guys every week. And that's ISENT Group Digital on YouTube. Again, don't forget to subscribe and send us those likes and comments and all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys next week where we talk about CBD. I need some CBD right now, actually. Yeah, I hear you.
All right, y'all. It's the HPR Chronicles with Shakur and Smith.
Peace.
We'll see you next week. Peace.